The Discernment Field Episode 9 Status Games and Social Hierarchies, Rank Recognition and the Invisible Ladders Beneath Behaviour. Hello, and welcome to the Discernment Field, a podcast on mind, behaviour, perception, and the search for clarity in an emotionally reactive world. In the previous episode, we explored the architecture of influence. We looked at how influence does not only begin with argument, persuasion, or obvious manipulation. It often begins in the design of the field itself, the frame, the language, the symbols, the authority cues, the repetition, the emotional atmosphere, the digital pathways, the rituals, and the arrangement of choices that prepare the body and mind to respond in certain ways. We asked what field we are inside, what frame is shaping the meaning, what emotion is being primed, what pathway is being made easiest, what questions are being made costly, and what would become visible if we stepped outside the architecture. Now we move into another layer of the strategic human. Because once the field has been designed, another question appears. Who carries weight inside that field? Who gets heard? Who gets believed? Who gets followed? Who gets copied? Who gets ignored? Who gets interrupted? Who gets punished for saying what someone else is praised for saying? Who is allowed to be angry, uncertain, vulnerable, flawed, complex, ambitious, messy, contradictory, or wrong without losing their place? That is the territory of status. Status is not only wealth. It is not only fame. It is not only beauty, celebrity, title, money, or formal power. Those things can create status, of course, but status is broader and more subtle than that. Status is a social value within a field. It is the invisible weight a person carries in a room. It is the sense that their words matter more, their mistakes matter less, their pain deserves more attention, their confidence feels more credible, their silence feels more meaningful, and their presence alters the atmosphere. Status tells people who to listen to before the truth has been spoken. That is one of the central lines of this episode. It matters because status can distort discernment. A high-status person can say something weak, and people may treat it as profound. A low-status person can say something accurate, and people may treat it as inconvenient, naive, dramatic, or irrelevant. The same idea can be dismissed when spoken by one person and celebrated when repeated by another. The content did not change. The rank of the speaker changed. This happens everywhere. In workplaces, a junior employee raises a concern and is labeled negatively. Later, a senior leader says the same thing and is called strategic. In families, the scapegoated person names the truth and is accused of causing trouble. Later, a respected elder admits the same truth and suddenly everyone can hear it. Online, a small account presents careful analysis and is ignored. A popular commentator repeats a simplified version and receives praise for insight. In relationships, one partner is framed as emotional, so their perception is discounted. The other is framed as rational, so their interpretation becomes the shared reality. This is why status is not only a social decoration, it is a perceptual force. It shapes what becomes believable. It shapes who must provide evidence and who is accepted on tone alone. It shapes whose anger is called passion and whose anger is called instability. It shapes whose confidence becomes leadership and whose confidence becomes arrogance. It shapes which vulnerability receives care and whose vulnerability becomes weakness. It shapes whose mistakes are contextualized and whose mistakes are treated as proof of character. Because status operates so quietly, people often mistake its effects for truth. They think they are responding to evidence when they are responding to rank. They think they are choosing freely when they are adapting to a hierarchy. They think someone is wise because the room treats them as wise. They think someone is difficult because the room has already placed them in that role. This episode is not about pretending hierarchy does not exist. Human beings naturally track rank, competence, reputation, confidence, strength, beauty, safety, trust, authority, and social position. We are social creatures. We learn from others. We look for cues about who knows what, who is safe to follow, who carries experience, who has earned trust, who has power, who can help, and who can harm. That instinct is not automatically wrong. Status can reflect real competence. Some people have earned respect through skill, wisdom, integrity, courage, or consistency. Some people are worth listening to because they have studied deeply, lived through something, practiced over time, demonstrated sound judgment, or contributed meaningfully. Not all hierarchy is corruption. Not all prestige is manipulation. Not all recognition is empty. But status becomes dangerous when it bypasses discernment. When confidence is mistaken for truth. When popularity is mistaken for wisdom. When wealth is mistaken for moral worth. When beauty is mistaken for goodness. When suffering is mistaken for infallibility. When credentials are mistaken for certainty. When calmness is mistaken for accuracy. When moral performance is mistaken for ethical depth. When social rank decides reality before evidence is examined. That is the danger. And there is another layer. We are not only influenced by other people's status, we are also shaped by our own desire for status. The fear of falling in the eyes of others can alter how we speak, what we hide, what we perform, what we exaggerate, what we silence, and which parts of ourselves we abandon. We may perform intelligence because we fear looking foolish. We may perform successfully because we fear being seen as behind. We may perform independence because need feels low status. We may perform healing because pain feels embarrassing. We may perform moral certainty because uncertainty risks social punishment. We may perform calmness because emotion lowers our rank in certain rooms. We may perform rebellion because in some spaces, rebellion itself carries status. So status is not only something other people have. Status is something we chase, protect, fear losing, resent in others, and sometimes organize our entire identity around. That is why this episode belongs here, after influence architecture. Because once the field is designed, status decides who moves through it with authority and who must fight to be recognized as real. It decides which voices seem credible before they have spoken. It decides which bodies are trusted, which tones are respected, which identities are protected, and which forms of suffering become visible. The question today is not simply, who has status? The deeper question is, what is status doing to perception? What is it making us believe too quickly? What is it making us dismiss too easily? What are we performing in order to rise? What are we hiding in order not to fall? And what would become visible if we stepped off the ladder long enough to see the person, the claim, the pattern, and the evidence without the distortion of rank? That is the field we enter today. Part 1. What is status? The social currency beneath behavior. To understand status clearly, we need to define it carefully. Status is social value within a particular field. It is the amount of attention, respect, credibility, desirability, protection, symbolic weight, or influence a person carries in a given social environment. That last phrase matters. In a given social environment, status is not fixed in the person alone. It is created between the person and the field. A person may be high status in one environment and low status in another. A wealthy businessperson may carry enormous status in a corporate room, but very little status in a spiritual retreat that values humility and detachment. A rebellious outsider may be dismissed in a traditional workplace, but admired in a countercultural space. A quiet academic may be overlooked at a loud social event, but deeply respected in an intellectual field. A physically attractive person may carry status in image-driven spaces, while a morally outspoken person may carry status in activist spaces, and a calm, controlled person may carry status in environments where emotional composure is treated as maturity. Every social field has its own currency. That is one of the most important ideas in this episode. In corporate spaces, the currency may be confidence, polish, productivity, credentials, strategic language, title, wealth, availability, and proximity to leadership. The person who speaks fluently in the accepted language of the organization may appear more capable, even if their ideas are ordinary. The person who works late may appear more committed, even if their boundaries are unhealthy. The person close to leadership may carry borrowed status, even if their actual judgment is weak. In activist spaces, the currency may be moral intensity, correct language, visible commitment, lived experience, public outrage, sacrifice, or the ability to identify harm quickly. These spaces may emerge from genuine concern for justice, but they can still create hierarchies. The person who appears most morally alert may rise in status. The person who asks for nuance may fall. The person who performs the strongest emotional alignment may be treated as more trustworthy than the person who is cautious, complex, or slow to declare a position. In spiritual spaces, the currency may be calmness, serenity, alignment, mystical language, perceived healing, detachment, intuitive authority, or closeness to a teacher. A person who speaks softly and appears regulated may be treated as wiser than someone who is still raw, grieving, angry, or uncertain. But calmness is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is maturity. Sometimes it is dissociation. Sometimes it is performance. Sometimes it is simply the acceptable signal in that field. In intellectual spaces, the currency may be complexity, skepticism, references, verbal precision, abstract thinking, reading history, specialized vocabulary, or the ability to dismantle weak arguments. That can support depth, but it can also create hierarchy. A person may begin to value sounding intelligent over being clear. They may use complexity as status rather than as service. They may dismiss embodied knowledge, emotional truth, or ordinary language because it does not carry the right intellectual signal. Online, the currency is often visibility. Likes, followers, shares, views, comments, recognizable branding, aesthetics, controversy, consistency, relatability, beauty, outrage, expertise, vulnerability, or novelty can all become status. The person with more attention appears more real. Their words travel further. Their opinions carry weight because the platform visibly measures their social value. In families, status can be even more hidden. It may come through age, sacrifice, money, parental authority, fragility, success, education, suffering, being the responsible one, being the golden child, being the one who provides, being the one who is protected, or being the one everyone has learned not to challenge. The hierarchy may never be named, but everyone feels it. Everyone knows whose mood matters most. Everyone knows who must be accommodated. Everyone knows who can speak sharply and who must soften. Everyone knows who is believed and who must over-explain. This is status as social currency. It tells us what the room values, and once we know what the room values, we begin to understand why people behave as they do. Because people do not only pursue money or formal power, they pursue recognition, they pursue belonging, they pursue not being humiliated, they pursue being taken seriously, they pursue desirability, they pursue protection, they pursue the feeling of being someone in the eyes of others. This does not make people shallow. It makes them human. Recognition is deeply connected to survival, attachment, identity, and meaning. To be completely ignored by the group is painful. To be dismissed, mocked, shamed, or treated as socially invisible can affect the nervous system profoundly. Human beings are not built to be indifferent to rank, because rank often shapes access to care, resources, mating, safety, influence, opportunity, and belonging. So the issue is not that status exists. The issue is when status becomes unconscious, when we do not know what currency we are chasing, when we do not know whose recognition we are adapting for, when we do not know what parts of ourselves we are editing to remain acceptable in a hierarchy, when we do not notice that a room has taught us what kind of person is valuable there. This is why the first discernment question is simple. What is the currency of this room? In this environment, what gives someone weight? Is it money, beauty, confidence, calmness, outrage, moral language, academic language, spiritual vocabulary, trauma history, productivity, sacrifice, humor, sexual desirability, success, victimhood, authority, rebellion, insider knowledge, proximity to power? Once you identify the currency, the behavior in the room begins to make more sense. People perform what the field rewards. If confidence is the currency, people will perform certainty. If beauty is the currency, people will perform appearance. If productivity is the currency, people will perform busyness. If moral purity is the currency, people will perform righteousness. If vulnerability is the currency, people may perform openness. If detachment is the currency, people may not care. If rebellion is the currency, people may perform opposition. If victimhood is the currency, people may cause injury. If expertise is the currency, people may perform knowledge. If calmness is the currency, people may perform regulation. The performance may not be entirely fake. That is important. A person can be genuinely confident and also receive status from confidence. A person can be genuinely wounded and also receive status from being seen as wounded. A person can be genuinely knowledgeable and also use knowledge as rank. A person can be genuinely moral and also become attached to moral superiority. A person can be genuinely calm and also hide behind calmness. Human motives are mixed. Status attaches itself to whatever the field rewards. This is why status can be difficult to see. It does not always look like vanity. It can look like goodness, intelligence, care, truth, wisdom, sacrifice, justice, professionalism, spirituality, independence, or emotional maturity. A person may not think, I want status. They may think, I want to be right. I want to be good. I want to be respected. I want to be safe. I want to belong. I want to be seen. I want to matter. Status often hides inside legitimate human needs. That is why discernment requires compassion as well as analysis. We do not examine status to mock people for wanting recognition. We examine status because when recognition becomes unconscious, it can begin to govern perception. A person may agree with the high status voice, because disagreeing would lower their own rank. They may stay silent because speaking would make them look difficult. They may laugh at a joke they dislike, because the room has already decided who is powerful. They may repeat language they do not fully understand, because that language signals belonging. They may dismiss a person not because the person is wrong, but because the person has low status in that field. Status becomes dangerous when it decides reality without announcing itself. So in this episode, we will keep returning to a core distinction. Status can be information, but it is not truth. Status may tell us someone has experience. It may tell us they are respected. It may tell us others trust them. It may tell us they have influence, skill, confidence, beauty, popularity, or symbolic power. But status does not automatically tell us whether their claim is true, whether their judgment is sound, whether their behavior is ethical, or whether their perception is clear. That is the work of discernment. To notice rank without kneeling before it. To honor genuine competence without surrendering truth to prestige. To recognize social value without confusing it with reality. To ask not only who matters in this room, but why do they matter here? And perhaps most importantly, what would I see if the currency of this room no longer controlled my perception? Part 2. Status and Perception. Why rank shapes what people believe. If status is a social value inside a field, then one of its most powerful effects is this. It shapes perception before evidence has been properly examined. It tells people whose voice carries weight, whose interpretation sounds reasonable, whose mistake can be forgiven, whose uncertainty sounds thoughtful, and whose confidence sounds like leadership. Status does not only decide who gets attention, it often decides how the same behavior is interpreted. A high-status person speaks with certainty, and people may call it confidence. A low-status person speaks with certainty, and people may call it arrogance. A high-status person changes their mind, and people may call it growth. A low-status person changes their mind, and people may call it inconsistency. A high-status person expresses anger, and people may call it passion. A low-status person expresses anger, and people may call it instability. A high-status person uses simple language, and people may call it clarity. A low-status person uses simple language, and people may call it lack of depth. The behavior may be almost identical. The meaning changes because the rank of the person changes. This is why status is so important to discernment. It does not simply decorate social life. It bends interpretation. It alters the emotional meaning of what people see and hear. It makes some people appear credible before they have earned credibility, and makes others struggle for credibility even when what they are saying is accurate. Status captures attention. Episode 4 explored how identity can capture intelligence, how a belief can become fused with the self so strongly that reasoning begins to defend identity instead of reality. Status works differently, but it is connected. Status captures attention by telling the room where to look, whom to trust, whom to admire, whom to imitate, whom to dismiss, and whom to doubt. It creates a gravitational field around certain people, claims, emotions, and performances. When a high-status person speaks, the room may lean in. When a low-status person speaks, the room may wait to see whether anyone important validates them. That difference can decide whether truth is heard. This appears in workplaces all the time. A junior employee raises a concern about a project. They have noticed a flaw. They have evidence. They have thought carefully. But because they are not senior, their concern is treated as anxiety, lack of experience, resistance, or overthinking. The room moves on. Later, someone with a title says the same thing. Suddenly, the concern becomes strategic foresight. The idea did not change. The status of the speaker changed. This is not only unfair, it is dangerous. It makes systems less intelligent. When truth has to travel through status before it can be recognized, the system loses access to perception from the edges. People closest to the problem may be least able to influence the response. Those with formal rank may be furthest from the detail, yet most trusted to interpret it. Status can therefore create blindness. A family can operate the same way. The child, the scapegoat, the younger sibling, or the person already labeled dramatic, may name a pattern for years. They may say, something is wrong here. They may point to the silence, the favoritism, the emotional manipulation, the unresolved hurt, the way everyone adapts around one person's mood. But because of their family status, they are dismissed. Too sensitive, too negative, always bringing things up, always causing trouble. Then, years later, a respected elder, a therapist, a successful sibling, or someone with higher family rank says something similar, and suddenly the family can hear it. The truth did not become truer. It became socially safer to acknowledge because it arrived through a higher status mouth. This is how status decides whose reality becomes shared reality. In public life, the same pattern is amplified. A person with a large platform can make a weak claim and receive immediate attention. Their followers repeat it. Critics respond to it. The claim travels because the person has status. Meanwhile, someone with less visibility may have already made a stronger argument, with better evidence, but it barely moved. The public field does not always reward accuracy. It often rewards status attached to accuracy, or status attached to confidence. This creates a troubling problem for discernment. We may believe we are evaluating ideas, when we are actually evaluating status signals. We may think this sounds credible, when what we really mean is this came from someone who looks credible. We may think this must matter, when what we really mean is a high-status person is talking about it. We may think this person seems wise, when what we really mean is the room treats them as wise. That is why one of the most useful questions is, would I believe this if it came from someone with less status? Would this argument still sound strong if it came from a person with no credentials, no followers, no beauty, no wealth, no calm delivery, no polished production, no reputation, no group approval? Would I dismiss this concern if it came from someone more respected? Would I call this person angry if they were powerful or passionate? Would I call this person emotional if they were popular or authentic? Would I call this person difficult if they were senior or courageous? These questions interrupt the automatic halo around status. There is a psychological tendency often called the halo effect, where one positive trait influences how we perceive other traits. A beautiful person may be assumed to be kinder, smarter, or more trustworthy. A confident person may be assumed to be more competent. A wealthy person may be assumed to be wiser. A calm speaker may be assumed to be more truthful. A popular figure may be assumed to understand more than they do. The glow from one kind of status spills into other areas. This does not mean beautiful, confident, wealthy, calm, or popular people are false. It means we must not let one signal become evidence for everything else. Beauty is not goodness. Confidence is not competence. Wealth is not wisdom. Calmness is not truth. Popularity is not accuracy. Credentials are not infallibility. Suffering is not moral perfection. Rebellion is not courage by default. Spiritual language is not depth by default. Intellectual complexity is not insight by default. These distinctions matter because status often disguises itself as evidence. Take confidence. Confidence can be useful. A person who knows what they are doing may speak with clarity because they have earned that clarity through experience. But confidence can also be performance. Some people sound certain because they have examined deeply. Others sound certain because uncertainty would threaten their status. Others sound certain because the culture rewards certainty more than accuracy. If the listener is not careful, the tone of certainty becomes more persuasive than the quality of reasoning. This is common in leadership. A confident leader can calm a room. But if confidence is mistaken for competence, the room may follow poor judgment simply because it is delivered with authority. Meanwhile, someone more careful may sound hesitant because they are accounting for complexity. Their caution may be misread as weakness, even though it may actually indicate deeper discernment. In many spaces, the person who says, I know, outranks the person who says, I need to check. But the second person may be closer to truth. Calmness operates similarly. Calmness can reflect regulation, wisdom, and emotional maturity. But calmness can also be detachment, suppression, dissociation, power, privilege, or performance. A person who is less affected by an issue may appear more rational simply because they have less at stake. Another person, more emotionally exposed, may speak with intensity because the issue touches lived experience. The calm person may be heard as objective. The emotional person may be dismissed as biased. But being affected does not automatically make someone wronged. Being calm does not automatically make someone right. Discernment asks us to separate delivery from evidence. It asks, what is the claim? What supports it? What pattern is being named? What might the emotional intensity reveal? What might the calmness conceal? Is this person regulated or merely removed? Is this person emotional or actually perceiving something the comfortable room does not want to see? Credentials also shape perception. They matter, but they are not magic. Expertise is valuable. Training can deepen understanding. Years of study can reveal complexity that casual opinion misses. but credentials can also become social armor. A credentialed person may be trusted beyond their field. An institution may be treated as neutral when it has incentives. A specialist may be mistaken for a general authority. A title may discourage necessary questions. The discerning position is not anti-expertise, it is accountable trust. It asks, what is this person's actual field of competence? What evidence are they presenting? What assumptions are involved? What uncertainty do they acknowledge? What incentives shape their position? What do other credible voices say? Are they helping me understand or asking me to obey their status? This is important because status can turn expertise into hierarchy rather than illumination. A good expert makes reality more navigable. A status-protected expert may make the public more dependent. The difference is not merely knowledge, it is how authority relates to questioning. Popularity is another powerful distortion. In digital culture, popularity is visible. Follower counts, views, likes, shares, comments, and public approval create measurable status. The more visible a person becomes, the more their words may feel important. But visibility is not the same as wisdom. A message can spread because it is accurate, but it can also spread because it is simple, emotional, divisive, beautiful, shocking, funny, flattering, or useful to identity. Popularity tells us that something has captured attention. It does not tell us whether it deserves belief. The same applies to wealth. Wealth often carries hidden moral and intellectual assumptions. A successful person may be treated as disciplined, intelligent, wise, visionary, or deserving. Sometimes success does reflect skill, courage, timing, persistence, or good judgment. But wealth can also come through inheritance, exploitation, luck, market dynamics, branding, social networks, or systems already tilted in someone's favor. If wealth becomes a status signal for wisdom, people may start taking life advice, moral advice, political advice, or spiritual advice from someone whose main evidence is accumulation. A person may know how to win a particular game. That does not mean they understand life. Beauty and desirability also alter perception. Attractive people are often granted more attention, patience, forgiveness, and assumption of goodness. Their emotions may be romanticized. Their mistakes may be softened. Their confidence may be seen as charm. Their self-focus may be seen as independence. Again, this does not mean attractive people are deceptive. It means beauty carries social power, and social power shapes interpretation. At the other end, people who do not fit the beauty currency of a field may be dismissed more quickly. Their awkwardness may be judged harshly. Their needs may receive less care. Their confidence may be seen as inappropriate. Their pain may be less visible. Status does not only elevate some, it makes others harder to see. Suffering can also become status, especially in moral or therapeutic fields. This is delicate because real suffering must be honored. People who have been harmed deserve care, protection, and belief that is serious enough to investigate. But suffering does not make someone automatically accurate about every interpretation, morally pure in every behavior, or exempt from all accountability. Victimhood can reveal truth, but it can also become a position that others are afraid to question. This is not to dismiss victims. It is to protect truth from being captured by any single status position, including the status of harm. A person can be harmed and still misinterpret. A person can be traumatized and still cause harm. A person can have lived experience and still need evidence. A person can speak from pain and still deserve compassion without being granted total authority over reality. That is maturity. Status distorts perception when it makes one person's position untouchable. Rebellion can become status too. In some fields, the rebel, skeptic, outsider, contrarian, or anti-establishment voice carries prestige. That can be useful when systems are corrupt or complacent. But rebellion itself is not proof of truth. A person can oppose mainstream narratives and still be wrong. They can sound brave because they contradict authority, but contradiction is not automatically discernment. Sometimes it is courage, sometimes it is identity, sometimes it is performance for a different hierarchy. Every field has its status ladder, even anti-status fields. The person who says, I do not care about status, may still care deeply about the status of being seen as above status. This is how subtle it becomes. Status can attach to humility, simplicity, spirituality, anti-materialism, outsider identity, trauma, intelligence, emotional control, moral concern, skepticism, artistic depth, or even refusal to participate. The ladder changes shape, but ranking remains. This is why status discernment must be inward as well as outward. It is easy to see when others are impressed by the wrong people. It is harder to ask where we are impressed. Whose approval changes our posture? Whose criticism feels unbearable? Who do we want to be seen beside? Who do we quote because they raise our own status? Who do we dismiss because they lower the status of our position? What kind of person do we secretly want to be mistaken for? These are uncomfortable questions, but they reveal the hidden influence of rank. Status shapes belief because belief is social. We rarely hold beliefs in isolation. Beliefs connect us to groups, identities, audiences, reputations, and imagined observers. If a belief raises status, we may become attached to it. If changing our mind would lower status, we may resist evidence. If a group rewards us for holding a belief, the belief becomes socially reinforced. If a high-status person validates us, we may feel more certain. If a low-status person challenges us, we may feel irritated rather than curious. That is not rational discernment. That is rank organizing perception. The antidote is not to pretend we can remove status entirely. We cannot, but we can slow its effect. We can notice it. We can separate signal from substance. We can ask whether status is helping us locate competence or preventing us from examining reality. A high status voice may be right, a low status voice may be wrong, but the reverse is also true. The work is to examine the claim, the evidence, the pattern, and the behavior without allowing social rank to decide in advance. This is why the question returns: would I believe this if it came from someone with less status? Would I dismiss this if it came from someone with more? Would I hear this pain differently if the person were more attractive, more articulate, more popular, more credentialed, more composed, more wealthy, more powerful, or more socially protected? Would I judge this anger differently if it came from someone the room already admired? Would I call this wisdom if it came from someone I did not want approval from? These questions do not remove bias instantly, but they create a pause. They interrupt the automatic authority of rank, and that pause is discernment, because status changes the meaning of the same behavior. But truth does not become true because a high status person speaks it, and truth does not become false because a low status person carries it. Part 3: Dominance, Prestige, and the two routes to rank: fear-based status and admiration-based status. If status shapes perception, then we need to understand how status is gained, because not all status works the same way. Some people gain rank because others fear them. Some gain rank because others admire them. Some hold status through punishment, intimidation, volatility, gatekeeping, or control. Others hold status through competence, wisdom, consistency, contribution, care, courage, or earned trust. These are two very different routes to rank. One route is dominance. The other is prestige. Dominance-based status says, you will respect me because there is a cost if you do not. Prestige-based status says, you may respect me because I have demonstrated value. That distinction matters enormously. Dominance makes people comply. Prestige makes people want to follow. Dominance relies on fear, pressure, consequence, humiliation, emotional volatility, exclusion, threat, or the ability to make life harder for someone. It does not always look like physical force. In everyday life, dominance often appears as social punishment, emotional punishment, reputational threat, financial leverage, professional gatekeeping, public ridicule, withdrawal of approval, or the power to decide who belongs. A dominant person may not say, I control this room. They may simply make everyone aware that disagreeing with them has consequences. Their tone shifts. Their warmth disappears. Their face hardens. They interrupt. They mock. They make examples of people. They withhold opportunity. They turn the group against someone. They become emotionally unsafe enough that others begin adapting before the punishment arrives. That is dominance as a control field. People may appear loyal, but their loyalty is defensive. They may appear respectful, but the respect is fear-shaped. They may appear aligned, but the alignment has been trained by consequence. They may say the right words, nod at the right times, laugh at the right jokes, avoid certain questions, and perform agreement, not because the dominant person is right, but because the cost of challenging them is too high. This is status through intimidation. Prestige is different. Prestige is status that arises from recognized value. Someone has skill. They have wisdom. They have insight. They have experience. They have shown courage. They have contributed meaningfully. They are consistent. They are trusted because their behavior over time has earned trust. Their presence does not shrink the field. It often expands it. People listen not because they fear punishment, but because the person has repeatedly shown something worth listening to. A prestigious person may have authority, but their authority does not require constant defense. They can be questioned. They can admit uncertainty. They can correct themselves. They can make room for others. Their status increases the agency of the people around them rather than reducing it. They do not need to dominate the field because the field recognizes their substance. That is healthy prestige. But, as always, discernment requires nuance. Dominance can disguise itself as prestige. Prestige can drift into dominance. A person may begin with real competence, real contribution, real wisdom, and genuine earned respect. But if admiration becomes too strong, if the group stops questioning them, if their status becomes untouchable, prestige can harden into hierarchy. The person may no longer need to intimidate directly because the group protects them. Their followers, colleagues, students, family, or audience may enforce the hierarchy on their behalf. This is how prestige can become sacred. A respected leader becomes beyond criticism. A teacher becomes the final interpreter. A public intellectual becomes a brand that must be defended. A spiritual figure becomes someone whose behavior is excused because of their perceived depth. A successful founder becomes someone whose judgment is trusted even outside their real competence. A charismatic activist becomes someone whose moral authority cannot be challenged without social cost. At that point, prestige begins to behave like dominance. Not always because the person intended it, but because the field has arranged itself around them. This is why a core discernment question is, can this person's authority be questioned without punishment? If yes, their status may be healthier. If no, something has shifted. In workplaces, dominance is often easy to recognize when it is overt. A manager shouts, humiliates, threatens, micromanages, or uses title power to silence dissent. But dominance can also be quiet. A manager may never raise their voice, but everyone knows that those who challenge them lose opportunity. A senior person may use polite language while controlling the field through subtle exclusion. Someone may say, I value feedback, but those who give honest feedback are slowly sidelined. The dominance is not in the statement, it is in the consequence. Prestige in a workplace looks different. A respected leader may have authority because they understand the work, protect the team, make clear decisions, admit mistakes, credit others, and remain steady under pressure. People listen because the leader has shown competence and integrity. Their presence makes others more capable. Their rank does not require everyone else to become smaller. A workplace can often be diagnosed by the kind of status it rewards. Does it reward dominance, polish, intimidation, and political maneuvering? Or does it reward competence, responsibility, courage, fairness, and actual contribution? If dominance rises faster than prestige, the culture will become strategic and guarded. People will begin managing impressions rather than telling the truth. They will protect themselves rather than improve the work. Families also create dominance and prestige structures. A dominant parent may control the emotional field through anger, guilt, silence, fragility, money, shame, or withdrawal. The family may organize itself around preventing their reaction. Everyone learns the rules. Do not upset them, do not contradict them, do not name the pattern, do not challenge the story, do not make them feel exposed. The parent may be called respected, but the respect may actually be fear. Prestige in a family looks more like earned elderhood. A parent, grandparent, or older relative carries influence because they have shown care, wisdom, accountability, and consistency. People turn to them because they feel steadier after the encounter. They may hold authority, but not because others are afraid. They hold it because their presence has become a source of orientation. That distinction can transform how we understand family dynamics. Some families confuse obedience with respect. They may say a child lacks respect when the child is actually refusing fear-based dominance. They may say someone is disrespectful when they are simply asking for accountability. But respect that cannot survive questions is not respect. It is submission. In relationships, dominance can appear through emotional control. One person may dominate not by shouting, but by becoming the emotional center of every disagreement. If they withdraw, the other must chase. If they become hurt, the other must apologize. If they feel threatened, the conversation ends. If their shame is activated, everyone must reorganize around it. The dominant person may not look powerful. They may even appear fragile. But if their emotional state controls what can be spoken, they hold status in the relationship. Fragility can become dominance when everyone else must abandon reality to protect it. That line is important. Not because fragility is always manipulative. People can be genuinely overwhelmed. People can need care. People can be tender, traumatized, or easily activated. But when one person's fragility consistently controls the field, prevents accountability, and makes others responsible for managing what can be said, fragility has become a status mechanism. Prestige in relationships looks like trustworthiness. It is not rank over the other person. It is the earned authority of consistency. A person becomes influential because they keep their word, repair harm, listen well, take responsibility, set boundaries cleanly, and remain human under pressure. Their emotional steadiness does not silence the other. It gives the relationship more room to be honest. Online spaces show the same pattern in accelerated form. Dominance appears as public humiliation, ridicule, pile-ons, social threat, mocking, quote tweeting, cancellation, reputation attacks, and the ability to mobilize an audience against someone. A high-status account can dominate a lower-status person not because their argument is better, but because their audience creates social danger. The lower status person may be technically free to respond, but the cost is unequal. Prestige online appears when someone earns attention through consistent insight, usefulness, creativity, accuracy, courage, or generosity. But even online prestige can become dominance if the audience becomes an enforcement mechanism. A person with genuine insight may become protected from challenge by followers who treat critique as betrayal. The field shifts from learning to loyalty. This is why status must always be examined relationally. It is not only about the individual. It is about how the field responds around the individual. Does their status create more truth or less? More agency or less? More inquiry or less? More courage or more self-censorship? A healthy status field allows rank to remain accountable. An unhealthy status field makes rank untouchable. Dominance and prestige also differ in how they respond to dissent. Dominance treats dissent as threat. It asks, who are you to challenge me? It may punish, ridicule, shame, exclude, reinterpret, or escalate. It protects rank by making challenge costly. It often reframes disagreement as disrespect, disloyalty, immaturity, ignorance, negativity, or harm. Prestige can tolerate dissent because it is not entirely dependent on control. A prestigious person may disagree strongly, but they can engage the content. They do not need to destroy the person. They can ask, what am I missing? They can say, I do not think that is accurate, and here is why. They can hold authority without needing to make the other person small. This is not softness, it is security. Secure status does not need constant protection. Insecure status does. This is why dominance often reveals fragility beneath the surface. The dominant person may appear powerful, but if their power cannot tolerate being questioned, it is brittle. Their status depends on maintaining the field, not on the strength of the truth. The moment the field shifts, they feel exposed. Prestige, when healthy, is less brittle. It can survive correction because it is grounded in substance. The person does not need to be perfect to remain respected. In fact, their willingness to be corrected may deepen respect. This gives us another discernment question. What happens when this person is wrong? If being wrong leads to repair, learning, or humility, the field may be healthy. If being wrong must be denied, hidden, reframed, or transferred onto someone lower in status, the rank structure is protecting itself. In spiritual, intellectual, therapeutic, or moral spaces, this becomes especially subtle because dominance may not use obvious aggression. It may use interpretation. A teacher may say your resistance is your ego. A therapist-like figure may say you are projecting. A group may say your discomfort means you are not ready. An intellectual leader may say you clearly do not understand the complexity. A moral authority may say your question is harmful. Sometimes these interpretations may be valid. Resistance can be ego. Projection can happen. People can misunderstand complexity. Questions can sometimes be careless. But when these interpretations are used automatically to protect the status figure or the group frame, they become dominance through language. The person being challenged is no longer allowed to disagree without being interpreted as defective. That is a powerful control move. Prestige in such spaces would invite deeper examination. It would not collapse all challenges into pathology. It would distinguish between bad faith, genuine confusion, emotional activation, and legitimate critique. It would allow the person to remain a subject, not merely an object being interpreted by the authority. This is where discernment has to ask, does this person's status increase my agency or reduce it? If their status helps me think more clearly, ask better questions, take more responsibility, and become more grounded in my own perception, it may be healthy. If their status makes me doubt myself reflexively, silence my questions, seek approval, fear exclusion, or outsource my judgment, it may be unhealthy. Healthy prestige matures the people around it. Dominance infantilizes them. This distinction also applies to the self. We may seek dominance when we feel unsafe. We may want to win, control the frame, silence opposition, force agreement, or make others feel the cost of challenging us. We may seek prestige when we want to be respected, recognized, admired, or valued. Neither impulse makes us evil, but we need to know which route we are using. Am I trying to be heard through contribution or through pressure? Am I trying to earn trust or demand it? Am I using insight to illuminate or using intelligence to dominate? Am I inviting respect or punishing people for not giving it? Am I creating more agency in others or making them smaller so I can feel larger? These questions bring status back into ethical awareness, because status is not inherently corrupt. A healthy status can orient a field. We need elders, mentors, teachers, skilled practitioners, wise leaders, trusted friends, experienced voices, and people whose judgment has been earned. A world with no prestige would not be freer. It might simply become chaotic, flat, and vulnerable to louder forms of dominance. The aim is not to destroy status. The aim is to purify our relationship with it, to distinguish earned trust from fear-based compliance, to recognize real competence without worshipping it, to challenge dominance without resenting all authority, to allow prestige to guide without allowing it to become untouchable. So the practice here is simple but demanding. When someone carries rank, ask, am I following because I respect their competence, or because I fear exclusion? Does their presence expand or shrink the field? Can people question them without punishment? Do they credit others or absorb all value into themselves? Do they become more honest when challenged or more controlling? Does their status make others more capable or more dependent? Is this authority earned through substance or maintained through consequence? And when you carry rank, ask the same of yourself. Do people agree because they trust you or because they fear your reaction? Do people tell you the truth or only what preserves your image? Does your presence make others more honest or more careful? Do you use your status to open the field or to protect yourself from challenge? These questions matter because status does not disappear when ignored. It simply operates unconsciously. Dominance and prestige are both routes to rank, but only one can support discernment. Dominance makes people obey the field. Prestige, when healthy, helps people see more clearly within it. Part 4: Status anxiety and social performance. The fear of falling in the eyes of others. If dominance and prestige show us two routes to rank, then status anxiety shows us what happens when the fear of losing rank begins to shape the self from the inside. Because status is not only something people possess, it is something people fear losing. And that fear can quietly organize speech, behavior, identity, relationships, belief, morality, and even the body's sense of safety. Status anxiety is the fear of falling in the eyes of others, not always dramatically, not always publicly. Sometimes it is subtle, the fear of looking foolish, the fear of seeming needy, the fear of being behind, the fear of being seen as poor, unsuccessful, unattractive, unhealed, unintelligent, immoral, weak, ordinary, irrelevant, aging, dependent, confused, or socially unnecessary. The fear that if people saw the unpolished truth of us, our value would decrease. This fear can become one of the hidden engines of social performance. People perform certainty because uncertainty can lower status. They perform success because failure can lower status. They perform independence because need can lower status. They perform calmness because emotional exposure can lower status. They perform moral clarity because complexity can lower status. They perform productivity because rest can look like weakness. They perform healing because ongoing pain can feel embarrassing. They perform confidence because hesitation can be interpreted as incompetence. Much human performance is an attempt not to fall. This is not simply vanity. It is not shallow to care how one is seen. Human beings are social creatures. Reputation has always mattered. In many contexts, how others perceive us affects opportunity, safety, relationships, employment, belonging, credibility, desire, protection, and access. To be humiliated, excluded, mocked, ignored, or socially diminished can hurt deeply because the nervous system reads social standing as part of survival. So the problem is not that we care about status. The problem is when fear of falling becomes stronger than our relationship with the truth. When we avoid admitting ignorance because we want to seem intelligent, learning becomes harder. When we hide pain because we want to seem strong, intimacy becomes thinner. When we perform successfully because we fear being seen as behind, we become trapped inside an image. When we silence disagreement because we fear losing belonging, the group becomes less honest. When we pretend to be healed because we fear being judged as messy, healing becomes performance rather than process. Status anxiety turns the self into a project for the eyes of others. Instead of asking what is true, we ask how will this make me look? Instead of asking what do I need, we ask will needing this lower me? Instead of asking what do I actually think, we ask what opinion will place me correctly in the room? Instead of asking what is my real state, we ask what state is acceptable here? That shift is subtle, but it can become enormous. The person begins living from the imagined gaze. They become internally split. One part of them experiences reality. Another part edits that reality for presentation. The body feels fear, but the face performs confidence. The heart feels grief, but the mouth performs composure. The mind feels uncertainty, but the voice performs certainty. Life feels messy, but the image performs ordered, and the longer that performance continues, the harder it becomes to know where performance ends and the self begins. This is where status anxiety connects directly to discernment. If I am trying not to fall, I may not be free to see. If a truth threatens my rank, I may avoid it. If a question makes me look ignorant, I may not ask it. If changing my mind makes me look inconsistent, I may defend a weak belief. If apologizing makes me feel lower, I may rationalize harm. If admitting I need help threatens my image, I may collapse privately while appearing strong publicly. Status anxiety distorts perception because it attaches social danger to honesty. The person is not only asking whether something is true, they are asking what truth will cost them socially. This happens in intellectual spaces. A person may avoid saying, I do not understand, because the room rewards cleverness. They may nod along with language they do not fully grasp. They may repeat phrases that carry status. They may dismiss simple explanations because simplicity feels lower rank. They may become attached to complexity, not because complexity is always needed, but because complexity signals depth. The result is a strange inversion. People may become less honest in spaces supposedly dedicated to thought. Everyone is performing understanding. Everyone is protecting intellectual status. Questions become risky. Clarity becomes less valued than impressive language. The room becomes clever, but not necessarily truthful. It also happens in spiritual spaces. A person may avoid admitting anger, envy, confusion, desire, resentment, or fear because the room rewards serenity, compassion, alignment, detachment, or high-frequency language. They may perform peace while their body is full of unprocessed conflict. They may call avoidance non-attachment. They may call dissociation presence. They may call people-pleasing love. They may call silence wisdom because the rawness of truth would lower their spiritual status. In that field, the person is not free to be human. They are performing transcendence. It happens in activist and moral spaces too. A person may fear asking a genuine question because the wrong wording could lower their moral standing. They may perform certainty before understanding. They may publicly agree while privately unsure. They may intensify outrage because outrage signals commitment. They may hide doubt because doubt might be read as complicity. They may speak in approved phrases, not always because those phrases are wrong, but because the phrases protect them from social suspicion. The result can be a field where people appear morally unified while privately anxious. The performance of goodness becomes more important than the slow work of ethical discernment. It happens in corporate environments. A person may perform confidence, availability, productivity, and strategic optimism because the workplace rewards those signals. They may avoid saying I am overwhelmed because overwhelm lowers status. They may avoid saying this plan is flawed because dissent lowers status. They may avoid saying I made a mistake because error threatens competence. They may work beyond capacity because exhaustion is treated as dedication. The person becomes successful at appearing successful while the body pays the cost. It happens in families. Someone may perform being fine because their role is the strong one. Someone may perform needing nothing because needs were mocked. Someone may perform loyalty because independence is read as betrayal. Someone may perform forgiveness because anger lowers their standing. Someone may perform gratitude because naming harm would make them seem ungrateful. Someone may perform maturity because the family rewards the person who can carry pain quietly. The family may say, you have always been so strong, without realizing that strength was a status role the person had to inhabit to remain loved. And of course, status anxiety is intensified by social media because digital platforms make social rank visible, measurable, comparable, and immediate. Likes, views, followers, shares, comments, reactions, saves, reposts, and public engagement become numerical signals of social value. The self is not only seen, it is measured. The person is not only expressing, they are being scored. When status becomes measurable, the self becomes performative. A post does well, and the person feels validated. A post is ignored, and they feel diminished. A photo receives attention, and the body learns what is desirable. A vulnerable confession receives sympathy, and the person learns what kind of wound gets recognition. A controversial statement receives engagement, and the person learns that intensity travels. A polished lifestyle image receives admiration, and the person learns that aspiration has currency. Over time, the platform trains the public self, not necessarily into falseness but into selectivity. Certain fragments are rewarded: the beautiful fragment, the outraged fragment, the wise fragment, the wounded fragment, the successful fragment, the rebellious fragment, the funny fragment, the spiritually elevated fragment, the morally certain fragment, the intellectually sharp fragment. Each fragment may be real, but when one fragment is repeatedly rewarded, it can begin to dominate the identity. The person starts asking, consciously or unconsciously, what version of me does this field want? And that question becomes dangerous when it replaces, what version of me is true? Status anxiety also creates comparison. Digital life exposes people constantly to curated lives, curated bodies, curated homes, curated relationships, curated productivity, curated healing, curated spirituality, curated creativity, curated success. The mind knows, in theory, that these are partial presentations, but the nervous system still compares. It sees evidence of others rising and asks, am I falling? Am I successful enough, attractive enough, interesting enough, healed enough, productive enough, independent enough, moral enough, loved enough, relevant enough? This constant comparison can create a low-grade status threat that never fully switches off. A person may not even realize they are anxious about rank. They simply feel behind, exposed, inadequate, urgent, restless. They feel they need to improve, prove, refine, earn, display, explain, or catch up. The marketplace then offers solutions. Buy this, become this, optimize this, heal this, enjoy this, learn this, show this, share this, build this, brand this. The anxiety of falling becomes commercially useful. Status anxiety becomes an engine of consumption. Beauty culture depends on this. Wealth culture depends on this. Productivity culture depends on this. Self-improvement culture can depend on this. Even healing culture can depend on this, when people begin to feel ashamed for not being healed enough, regulated enough, embodied enough, enlightened enough, or emotionally mature enough. A person may enter healing to become free from performance, then find themselves performing healing. This is why discernment must ask, what version of myself am I performing to avoid falling? That question can open a deep self-examination. Am I performing intelligence because I fear being ordinary? Am I performing calmness because I fear being too much? Am I performing independence because I fear rejection if I need? Am I performing success because I fear being pitted? Am I performing moral certainty because I fear being judged? Am I performing spiritual maturity because I fear my anger? Am I performing busyness because I fear feeling worthless at rest? Am I performing detachment because I fear desire? Am I performing strength because I fear being cared for? This is not about shaming performance. Some performance is necessary. Social life requires adaptation. We do not express every feeling everywhere. We choose how to present ourselves depending on context. Professionalism, privacy, courtesy, timing, and emotional regulation all matter. The problem is not that we have a public self. The problem is when the public self becomes a prison. A healthy public self is flexible. It can adapt without betraying truth. An unhealthy performance becomes rigid. It must be maintained at all costs. It cannot admit contradiction. It cannot be messy. It cannot ask for help. It cannot say, I do not know. It cannot say, I was wrong. It cannot say, I am hurt. It cannot say, I am still learning. It cannot risk falling. Status anxiety also explains why people sometimes attack those who expose what they are to hide in themselves. The person performing certainty may resent someone who can admit uncertainty. The person performing success may resent someone who speaks honestly about struggle. The person performing moral purity may attack someone who reveals moral complexity. The person performing calmness may pathologize someone's anger. The person performing independence may judge need as weakness. Other people's authenticity can threaten our performance. If I have sacrificed part of myself to maintain rank, someone else's freedom may feel like accusation. Their honesty exposes my self-betrayal. Their vulnerability exposes my armor. Their rest exposes my overwork. Their uncertainty exposes my false certainty. Their refusal to perform may feel like disrespect to the ladder I am still climbing. This is one reason social fields punish authenticity. Not always because authenticity is wrong, but because it disrupts the performances everyone else has invested in. Status anxiety can also keep people trapped in relationships, communities, careers, and identities they have outgrown. Leaving may mean loss of rank. The person known as successful may not want to admit the career is empty. The person known as spiritual may not want to admit doubt. The person known as politically certain may not want to admit complexity. The person known as strong may not want to admit loneliness. The person known as healed may not want to admit they are still in pain. The higher the status attached to an identity, the harder it may be to leave. This is why status anxiety is not only about wanting approval, it is about fear of symbolic death. If the identity falls, who am I? If the audience no longer recognizes me, what remains? If I stop being the clever one, the strong one, the moral one, the calm one, the successful one, the independent one, the wounded one, the rebel, the healer, the expert, the outsider, the leader, what self is left beneath the role? This question can feel terrifying, but it is also the doorway back to reality, because beneath status performance is usually a more human self, a self that does not always know, a self that needs, a self that fails, a self that changes, a self that wants to be loved without earning the room's approval, a self that wants to speak without calculating rank, a self that wants to rest without falling, a self that wants to be seen without being measured. Discernment asks us to return to that self, not by rejecting all status, not by pretending we do not care, not by becoming superior to those who perform, but by becoming honest about the performance itself. The moment we can say, I am performing certainty because I feel unsafe being unsure, we regain a little freedom. The moment we can say, I am performing success because I fear being seen as behind, we regain a little freedom. The moment we can say, I am performing calmness because anger would lower me here, we regain a little freedom. The moment we can say, I am performing goodness because I fear being judged, we regain a little freedom. Awareness loosens the ladder, then we can make different choices. We can admit we do not know. We can ask the question. We can rest. We can speak honestly. We can let a public image become less polished. We can stop using emotional language as status. We can apologize without feeling annihilated. We can allow ourselves to be seen in process rather than only in performance. That is not easy. The body may still fear falling. The old status field may still punish authenticity. Not every environment is safe enough for full honesty. Discernment also means choosing where, when, and with whom to reveal what is real. But somewhere, the self must have a place where it does not have to perform rank to exist. Without that place, the person becomes a social object, managed, curated, measured, refined, defended, and displayed, but not fully lived. So the question at the center of this part is not merely, what status do I have? It is, what am I afraid people would see if I stopped performing? And what might become possible if falling in their eyes was not the same as losing myself? Part 5: Moral status, victim status, and a clean self. When goodness becomes a ranking system, if status anxiety makes people perform to avoid falling, moral status reveals one of the most sensitive forms of that performance, the desire to be seen as good. This is delicate territory because moral awareness matters. Harm matters, justice matters. Accountability matters, care matters. There are moments when people need to speak clearly about what is wrong, what is cruel, what is exploitative, what is abusive, what is dishonest, and what must not be normalized. A culture without moral language becomes emotionally numb. A person who cannot name harm becomes vulnerable to it. A group that refuses accountability becomes dangerous. So the issue is not morality itself. The issue is what happens when morality becomes a ranking system. When goodness becomes status, truth can become secondary to appearing good. That is the line at the center of this part. Because once moral language becomes a ladder, people begin competing for position within it. Who is the most aware? Who is the most compassionate? Who is the most harmed? Who is the most righteous? Who is the most pure? Who has the cleanest motives? Who used the correct language first? Who reacted quickly enough? Who condemned strongly enough? Who has the greatest claim to innocence, virtue, victimhood, justice, or moral authority? At that point, the field can shift. The question is no longer only what happened, or what would repair require, or what is true. The question becomes who gets to occupy the clean position. This can happen in public discourse, relationships, families, workplaces, spiritual communities, activist circles, therapeutic spaces, online culture, and even private conflict. The content changes, but the pattern remains. A moral issue appears. People begin arranging themselves around it. Some become defenders, some become accusers, some become victims, some become villains, some become witnesses, some become judges, some become silent because they are afraid of being placed on the wrong side of the moral map, and when the moral map becomes rigid, perception narrows. One of the most obvious examples is public outrage as moral ranking. Something happens publicly. It may be a real injustice, a cruel statement, a policy failure, a scandal, an abuse of power, or a moment of hypocrisy. People respond. Some responses are sincere and necessary, but then the social field begins measuring the response itself. Who condemned it strongly enough? Who posted quickly enough? Who used the right words? Who stayed silent? Who asked for context? Who hesitated? Who complicated the frame? Now moral concern becomes a public performance. This does not mean the original harm is not real. It means the group response can become a status game around the harm. People may begin performing moral intensity because intensity signals belonging. They may become afraid to ask careful questions because careful questions could be interpreted as weakness, complicity, or betrayal. They may repeat the approved phrases not because the phrases are false, but because the phrases protect them from suspicion. The field rewards visible righteousness, and when visible righteousness becomes the reward, reflection can become dangerous. This is why outrage can feel so clean. It gives the self a position. I am not like them. I see the harm. I am on the right side. I am awake. I am compassionate. I am morally responsive. Sometimes that position is grounded in real conscience. But sometimes the emotional reward of being morally positioned becomes stronger than the actual work of repair. The clean self feels good. The clean self does not have to examine its own contradictions. It does not have to ask whether its reaction is proportionate. It does not have to ask whether it is using another person's failure to feel superior. It does not have to ask whether the punishment being demanded actually heals anything. It does not have to ask whether its own side behaves similarly. It does not have to ask whether truth is being served or only identity. Moral status can also appear through victim status. This is especially sensitive because victims deserve care. People who have been harmed should be listened to. Their pain should not be dismissed, minimized, or turned against them. Many people have spent years not being believed, and so it matters deeply that we create cultures where suffering can be spoken. But victimhood can also become social rank when the identity of being harmed becomes a position that cannot be questioned, complicated, or held accountable. A person can be genuinely harmed and still misinterpret something. A person can be wounded and still wound others. A person can have trauma and still need boundaries. A person can deserve compassion and still not be automatically right about every detail. This distinction is essential. To say this is not to attack victims, it is to protect reality. Because if suffering becomes infallibility, truth becomes vulnerable. People may become afraid to ask what actually happened. They may become afraid to notice inconsistencies. They may become afraid to say, I believe you were hurt, and I also think this part needs more clarity. The field may collapse nuance into cruelty. Anyone asking for proportion may be framed as dismissive. Anyone asking for evidence may be framed as unsafe. Anyone naming mutual responsibility may be accused of victim blaming. There are times when those accusations are valid. People do dismiss harm. People do protect perpetrators. People do demand impossible standards from victims. But the answer cannot be to make harm language immune from discernment. If a category becomes untouchable, it becomes powerful enough to be misused. A discerning field can hold both truths. Real harm deserves serious care, and harm language must not be allowed to become a shield against all accountability. Moral status also appears in purity spirals. A group begins with a real ethical concern. Then the standards of visible purity intensify. People compete, often unconsciously, to appear more aware, more committed, more uncompromising, more morally clean. What was once a shared concern becomes a ranking system. The acceptable language becomes narrower. The punishments become sharper. The group begins turning inward, policing itself, identifying impurities, measuring commitment, and treating doubt as contamination. Purity spirals can happen in political groups, religious groups, activist spaces, spiritual communities, health movements, intellectual circles, and online subcultures. They are not exclusive to one ideology. Any group can become captured by moral status when belonging depends on visible purity. The danger is that purity often becomes anti-truth. Truth is messy. Human beings are contradictory. Repair is slow. Ethical life requires proportion. But purity wants clean categories, pure and impure, safe and unsafe, good and bad, awake and asleep, evolved and unevolved, harmful and harmed, with us and against us. Purity gives the nervous system certainty. But certainty is not the same as discernment. Virtue signaling is another expression of moral status, though the term is often overused and sometimes weaponized. At its best, the phrase points to a real phenomenon, people publicly displaying moral positions to gain approval, belonging, admiration, or protection. But we have to be careful. Not every public moral statement is virtue signaling. Sometimes people speak publicly because silence would protect harm. Sometimes public moral speech matters. The question is not, did they speak publicly? The question is, does the signal connect to substance? Does the person's public compassion appear in private behavior? Does their moral language translate into repair, responsibility, sacrifice, or care? Are they willing to correct their own side? Can they apologize? Can they hold complexity? Can they name harm without turning it into a ladder? Can they remain ethical when it costs status? Because moral status is most visible when being good is rewarded, but doing good becomes secondary. Someone may speak beautifully about compassion while treating people close to them with contempt. Someone may call for accountability while refusing it personally. Someone may use the language of trauma, safety, and harm while controlling the field through shame. Someone may speak about healing while ranking themselves above those who are still visibly wounded. Someone may call themselves emotionally intelligent while using calmness to dominate someone whose distress is more visible. This is why the clean self is so seductive. It allows a person to occupy moral height without necessarily doing the deeper work. The clean self says, I am the good one. I am the aware one. I am the harmed one. I am the safe one. I am the evolved one. I am the compassionate one. I am the one who sees. But the clean self can become another identity capture, and once the identity of goodness is at stake, the person may resist any truth that complicates it. This is where moral status connects directly to episode 4. Identity captures intelligence when a belief protects the self-image. Moral status captures discernment when goodness becomes the self-image. The mind then begins defending not truth, but innocence, not repair, but moral position, not clarity, but the need to remain clean. In relationships, this can become devastating. One person may control the moral frame by always occupying the injured position. Every conflict becomes proof of how they were hurt. Every challenge becomes insensitivity. Every boundary becomes abandonment. Every disagreement becomes harm. The other person may eventually stop bringing concerns because any concern will be absorbed into the moral structure where one person is always victim and the other is always offender. This does not mean the injured person has no real pain. They may have deep pain. But if pain always controls the frame, accountability becomes one-directional. A healthy relationship allows hurt to be named without making one person permanently morally superior. It allows both people to have impact. It allows repair to move both ways. It can say, you were hurt here, and I need to understand that, while also saying, your hurt does not erase the effect of your behavior. That is maturity. In families, moral status can appear through sacrifice. The person who sacrificed the most may become untouchable. A parent may say, after everything I did for you, and that sacrifice becomes moral rank. It may be true that they sacrificed. It may also be true that their sacrifice is being used to silence the child's truth. Sacrifice can be real and still become leverage. In workplaces, moral status may appear through being the hardest worker, the most loyal, the most positive, the most values-aligned, the most resilient. Someone may use their visible dedication to rank themselves above those who set boundaries. The person who protects rest may be framed as less committed. The person who names burnout may be framed as negative. The moral ladder is no longer goodness in the spiritual sense, but organizational virtue. In spiritual spaces, moral status may appear as evolved consciousness, the calm one, the detached one, the high vibration one, the forgiving one, the one who does not get triggered, the one who has transcended ego. Again, these qualities may be real and valuable, but if they become status, people may begin hiding anger, grief, envy, desire, doubt, or pain, because those emotions lower rank in the spiritual field. The result is not liberation, it is performance in softer clothing. So how does discernment work here? First ask, is this about repair or rank? Repair asks what happened, what was harmed, what needs to be acknowledged, what needs to change, what boundaries are required, and how truth can be restored. Rank asks who gets the clean position, who is above, who is below, who gets shame, who gets applause, who is allowed to speak, and who must submit. Second ask, is harm being named to heal, or used to control the frame? Naming harm can be courageous, but if harm language is used to shut down all questioning, reverse accountability, or keep one person permanently morally superior, the field has become distorted. Third ask, can accountability move in more than one direction? In many unhealthy moral fields, accountability only moves downward. The low-status person must apologize. The accused must submit. The outsider must prove innocence. The less protected person must over-explain. But healthy accountability can move in all directions. Everyone can be named. Everyone can repair. Everyone can be wrong. Fourth ask, is moral language increasing truth or protecting image? If the language creates more clarity, responsibility, and repair, it may be serving conscience. If it creates fear, performance, silence, purity, competition, and untouchable roles, it may be serving status. Finally, ask inwardly, what do I gain from being the good one? That question is difficult. It does not mean we abandon morality. It means we stop using morality as a hiding place. Do I gain superiority, belonging, protection from shame, a clean identity, a reason not to examine my own harm, a way to avoid uncertainty, a way to feel above people I resent? This is not self-condemnation. It is self-honesty, because the goal is not to stop caring about goodness. The goal is to free goodness from performance. Real goodness is often quieter than moral status. It repairs when no one is watching. It tells the truth, even when it complicates the self-image. It protects the harmed without making harm into a weapon. It can apologize. It can listen. It can hold proportion. It can act without needing an audience. It can be strong without becoming cruel. It can be compassionate without becoming naive. It can be morally serious without becoming morally possessed. When goodness becomes status, truth bends around the need to appear clean. But when goodness becomes practice, truth can breathe. Part 6, status in relationships, families, and workplaces. The hidden rank beneath everyday interaction status does not only operate in public platforms, institutions, or obvious hierarchies. It lives inside ordinary life. It lives in the room, the relationship, the family table, the workplace meeting, the friendship group, the message thread, the creative circle, the community space. It decides who gets believed quickly, who has to explain themselves repeatedly, who is allowed to be emotional, who must stay composed, who is forgiven, who is labeled, who is protected, and who becomes the problem when the truth becomes uncomfortable. This is why status is so difficult to see. It often disguises itself as personality, role, maturity, history, authority, or just how things are. One person is the rational one, another is the emotional one is the successful one, another is the difficult one is the responsible one, another is the selfish one is the sensitive one, another is the strong one. These labels may contain fragments of truth, but once they become fixed, they become status positions. They decide how the room interprets each person before anything new is said. In relationships, status often hides beneath emotional roles. One partner may carry rational status. They are calm, articulate, measured, or less visibly affected. Their tone gives them authority. The other partner may carry emotional stigma. They cry more easily, speak with intensity, become overwhelmed, or show distress more openly. Over time, the relationship may begin treating calmness as truth and distress as distortion. But calmness is not always clarity. Distress is not always inaccuracy. The calm partner may be regulated, or they may be detached, dismissive, avoidant, or protected by emotional distance. The distressed partner may be activated, but they may also be registering something real that the calmer person is refusing to feel. If the relationship automatically gives more credibility to the person who appears composed, status has entered the field. One person may say, "I'm just being logical," and that phrase becomes rank. It positions their interpretation as higher, cleaner, more objective. The other person becomes the emotional one, the reactive one, the one whose perception must be corrected. This does not mean logic is unimportant. It means logic can become a status costume. A person can use rational language to avoid accountability, just as another can use emotion to avoid accountability. Discernment asks us to look at behavior, pattern, evidence, and impact, not merely the emotional style of the speaker. Status also appears through desirability. In some relationships, the person with more sexual, romantic, social, or financial options may hold quiet power. They may not need to threaten leaving. The possibility of leaving is already in the field. The other partner may adapt more, pursue more, tolerate more, apologize more quickly, or shrink their needs because they feel lower in the relational hierarchy. The relationship may still use the language of equality, but the emotional economy says otherwise. There can also be financial status. The person who earns more may consciously or unconsciously carry decision-making power. Their preferences may matter more. Their exhaustion may receive more respect. Their time may be treated as more valuable. The person earning less may feel they have to justify needs, purchases, boundaries, or choices. Even if no one says, "My money gives me rank," the field may behave as if it does. Moral status can enter relationships too. One partner may become the good one, the patient one, the one who has done the work, the emotionally intelligent one. The other becomes the one who must catch up. In that field, disagreement becomes difficult because one person's self-image is already morally elevated. Their language may sound therapeutic, but the relationship structure becomes hierarchical. One interprets, the other is interpreted. One diagnoses, the other defends. One is evolved, the other is triggered. This is not intimacy. It is rank disguised as insight. Families carry some of the strongest status structures because they are formed early, repeated over the years, and rarely named. Parent rank is the obvious one. Parents hold authority over children, and in healthy development, some hierarchy is necessary. Children need care, boundaries, guidance, protection, and structure. But parents' rank becomes distorted when authority cannot be questioned. Even after the child becomes an adult, the parent remains the final narrator. Their version becomes family reality. Their sacrifice becomes moral leverage. Their fragility becomes everyone else's responsibility. Their anger becomes the weather that the whole house must adapt to. A family may say it is built on love, but status decides whose love defines the terms. There is also elder status. Older relatives may be granted automatic credibility because of age, tradition, or position. Sometimes that is appropriate. Age can bring wisdom, memory, and perspective. But age can also become immunity from accountability. Respect your elders can mean honoring experience, or it can mean silence before power. The discerning question is, does elder status create guidance, or does it prevent truth? Then there are sibling hierarchies. The golden child and the scapegoat are status roles. The golden child may be protected, believed, praised, or excused. Their mistakes are contextualized. Their success belongs to the family story. The scapegoat may be blamed, doubted, corrected, or treated as the source of disruption. Their legitimate concerns are filtered through the role already assigned to them. If they are upset, they are dramatic. If they are silent, they are resentful. If they succeed, they are arrogant. If they fail, it confirms the role. In such a system, truth is not distributed evenly. It passes through rank. Sacrifice can also become family status. The person who gave the most, suffered the most, worked the hardest, or held the family together may carry moral authority. Their sacrifice may be real, but if sacrifice becomes untouchable rank, it can silence everyone else. After everything I've done becomes a shield against accountability. Others may feel they have no right to speak because gratitude is demanded before truth. Fragility can become status too. A family may organize itself around the most emotionally fragile person. No one can upset them. No one can challenge them. No one can tell them the full truth. Everyone edits themselves to preserve their stability. The fragile person may not look powerful, but if their state controls what can be said, they hold rank. Again, this does not mean fragility is fake. It means fragility can become central enough that everyone else's reality becomes secondary. Workplaces make status more visible, but not always more honest. Title status is obvious. Manager, director, founder, senior leader, expert, consultant. Titles can reflect responsibility and experience. They can also distort perception. A weak idea from a senior person may be treated as strategic. A strong idea from a junior person may be treated as premature. A senior person's mood may reshape the meeting. A junior person's discomfort may be ignored. Then there is confidence status. In many workplaces, confidence travels faster than competence. The person who speaks smoothly, uses the right language, occupies space easily, and sounds decisive may be perceived as more capable than the quieter person who understands the detail. Confidence can be a useful signal, but it is not proof. If the room rewards confidence too strongly, it may begin promoting performance over substance. Busyness status is another workplace currency. The person who is always overloaded may be treated as important. The person who responds instantly may be seen as committed. The person who stays late may be praised. The person who protects boundaries may be seen as less dedicated. In that culture, exhaustion becomes rank. People begin competing through depletion. The organization calls it commitment, but the body knows it as extraction. Proximity to leadership creates borrowed status. Someone may not have formal authority, but if they are close to those who do, others treat them carefully. Their opinions matter because they may travel upward. Their approval matters because it may influence opportunity. Their criticism matters because it may damage their reputation. They become part of the power weather in the room. Workplace status also decides who can make mistakes safely. A high-status person may make an error and receive context. They were under pressure, they were moving fast, they took a bold risk. A low-status person makes a similar error and it becomes evidence of incompetence. One person is allowed to be complex. Another is reduced to proof. This is one of the clearest signs of status distortion. Who receives context and who receives judgment? Who is allowed to be tired? Who is allowed to be angry? Who is allowed to disagree? Who is allowed to be direct? Who is allowed to need help? Who is allowed to fail without being defined by failure? Status decides the answer. In meetings, status appears through interruption. Who gets interrupted without consequence? Who is allowed to interrupt? Who speaks and receives silence? Who speaks and receives immediate challenge? Who makes a point that is ignored until someone higher repeats it? Who is credited? Who is asked to provide evidence? Who is trusted on instinct? Who has to soften every sentence so the room can tolerate it? These are not small details. They shape organizational intelligence. If low-status people learn that their perception will be dismissed, they stop offering it. If high-status people learn that their ideas will be praised regardless of quality, they stop refining them. The whole system becomes less truthful. This is why status-aware discernment matters. It does not simply ask, who is right? It asks, whose reality is being allowed to become shared reality? That question applies across relationships, families, and workplaces. In a relationship, whose interpretation becomes the official version of events? In a family, whose memory counts? In a workplace, whose concern becomes actionable? In a friendship group, whose discomfort is accommodated? In a community, whose pain is believed? In a public field, whose voice becomes representative? Status decides whose reality travels, and when status is unconscious, people may call that reality the truth, simply because it came from the person the field already trusted. Discernment asks us to slow that down. Who is automatically believed? Who has to over-explain? Who can make mistakes safely? Who is allowed to be angry? Who gets labeled difficult? Who receives context and who receives judgment? Who is protected by the hierarchy? Who is exhausted by it? Who has learned to stay silent because speaking costs too much? These questions reveal the hidden rank beneath everyday interaction. They also invite self-examination. Where do I hold rank? Whose voice do I accidentally overlook because they have less status in my field? Who speaks around me with more caution than honesty? Who might be telling me what preserves my comfort rather than what is true? Where do I dismiss someone because of the role I have placed them in? Where do I expect others to adapt around my status, fragility, confidence, intelligence, experience, or sacrifice? Where do I give my perception away because someone else carries rank? Do I assume the calm person is right? The successful person is wise? The articulate person is accurate? The wounded person is morally pure? The elder is always correct? The expert is beyond question? The popular person must know something I do not. Status awareness is not about flattening every difference. Some people do have more experience. Some are more competent. Some have earned trust. Some roles require authority. But healthy status must remain accountable to reality. It must be possible for truth to move upward, downward, sideways, and from the edge into the center. A healthy relationship lets both people affect the shared reality. A healthy family can hear truth from the person who was previously dismissed. A healthy workplace can recognize a good idea before it becomes attached to senior status. A healthy community can honor experience without silencing the less recognized. That is what status-aware discernment asks for, not a world without rank. A world where rank no longer decides truth before truth has spoken. Part 7 Field Scenario, Applied Status Analysis. This is where we bring status out of theory and place it inside a real-world field, because status is easiest to recognize when we are not personally invested in the hierarchy. Once we are inside the room, inside the group, inside the family, inside the workplace, inside the audience, it becomes much harder to see. Rank begins to feel like reality. The person with status feels naturally credible. The person without status feels naturally questionable. The room does not experience itself as biased. It experiences itself as reasonable. So let us imagine a workplace scenario, though this could easily apply to a community group, academic space, public debate, creative project, family meeting, or political discussion. A team is working on a major project. There is pressure from above. Deadlines are tight. The organization wants the work to look successful. Everyone in the room knows there are problems, but not everyone has equal permission to name them. A junior employee notices something important. Perhaps they are closer to the details than anyone else. They see that the timeline is unrealistic, that the data has been misread, that a key audience has been misunderstood, that a technical flaw has been ignored, or that the public messaging will create confusion. They are not trying to undermine the project, they are trying to protect it. So they raise the concern carefully. They say, I think we may need to revisit this part before launch. There's a risk the current version could create problems later. The room pauses. A senior person smiles politely and says, that's useful, but I think we're probably overcomplicating this. Another person says, we've already agreed on the direction. Someone else says, at this stage, we need to stay focused on delivery. The concern is not attacked directly. It is simply lowered in importance. The junior employee feels the shift. They have not been humiliated, but they have been placed. Their concern is treated as hesitation, inexperience, overthinking, or a lack of strategic perspective. The meeting moves on. A few days later, a senior leader enters the same discussion. Perhaps they have heard fragments of the issue elsewhere, or perhaps they have now noticed the same flaw. They say, I think we need to pause and revisit this area. If we launch as it stands, there may be a serious risk. The room changes. People nod. Someone says, that's a good point. Another says, yes, I was wondering about that too. The concern becomes important. The same idea that was previously inconvenient now becomes strategic. The same warning that sounded premature from a junior employee now sounds wise from a senior figure. The content did not change. The status of the speaker changed. That is applied status analysis. The first question is, what gave the idea credibility? Was it evidence? Was it reasoning? Was it the quality of the concern? Or was it the rank of the person who finally said it? If the concern was weak when spoken by a junior person but strong when spoken by a senior one, the room was not only evaluating truth, it was evaluating the status. The second question is, who had to work harder to be heard? The junior person had to soften, qualify, justify, time carefully, and risk being seen as difficult. The senior person could speak directly and be received as strategic. That difference matters. Status often gives some people direct access to credibility, while making others earn credibility again and again. The third question is, who was believed quickly? High-status people are often granted interpretive credit. Their words arrive with borrowed authority. The room assumes there is something behind what they are saying. Their concern is seen as insight. Their doubt is seen as caution. Their challenge is seen as leadership. Their mistake is given context. Low-status people are often required to prove the obvious. Their concern is seen as anxiety. Their doubt is seen as insecurity. Their challenge is seen as attitude. Their mistake becomes evidence of limitation. They may need more data, more tact, more emotional control, more timing, more diplomacy, and more repetition before the room grants them reality. This is how status trains silence. The junior employee learns, it is not enough to see clearly. I need rank for my perception to matter. They may stop raising concerns. Or they may only speak privately. Or they may wait for someone more senior to validate the point. Or they may begin attaching their ideas to higher status people in order to survive the room. The system then becomes less intelligent, because information from the edges no longer travels freely to the center. This does not only harm the lower status person, it harms the whole organization. The people closest to the detail are often the first to detect problems. The assistant, the junior researcher, the frontline worker, the customer service agent, the technical operator, the new team member, the person outside the dominant culture, they may see what others miss precisely because they are positioned differently. But if status prevents their perception from being taken seriously, the system blinds itself. Status does not only decide who gets credit, it decides what the system is able to know. Now imagine the same pattern in a public controversy. A lower status researcher, journalist, independent creator, community member, or ordinary citizen raises an issue early. They present evidence. They point to inconsistencies. They ask whether the public story is too simplified. At first, they are ignored or dismissed. They do not have the platform, credentials, institutional backing, or recognizable status required for the claim to travel. Later, a high-status commentator, institution, celebrity expert, or major outlet says something similar. Suddenly, the issue becomes serious. People say, this is now being talked about, but it was already being talked about. It simply was not being heard from the lower status position. This creates a dangerous social pattern. Truth is not recognized when it appears, it is recognized when it is authorized. Once truth requires authorization by status, discernment becomes dependent on hierarchy. This does not mean every low-status voice is right. Many are wrong. Many claims from the margins are weak, confused, exaggerated, or poorly evidenced. Nor does it mean every high-status voice is false. Many are credible. Many have earned their position. Many use their status responsibly. The point is not to invert the hierarchy and assume lower status always means truer. The point is to separate the claim from the rank. Applied status discernment asks, what is being said, what evidence supports it, what pattern is being named, and would I hear this differently if someone else said it? That question is the interruption. Let us return to the workplace scenario. What would a status-aware field do differently? First, it would create channels where ideas can be assessed before rank distorts them. In a meeting, this might mean asking, can we look at the substance of that concern, rather than letting the room move past it because the speaker is junior? It might mean documenting concerns and testing them against evidence. It might mean inviting those closest to the work to speak before senior voices dominate. It might mean leaders deliberately saying, I want to hear from the people closest to the detail first. Second, it would protect lower status truth-telling from reputational punishment. If someone raises a concern respectfully, they should not be labeled negatively simply because the concern disrupts momentum. If status-aware leadership is present, it recognizes that inconvenient information is often most valuable before it becomes visible to everyone. Third, it would be credited accurately. If the senior leader later repeats the junior person's concern, someone should say, that connects with the point raised earlier. This is not just politeness, it corrects the status field. It teaches the room that perception matters even when it comes from below the formal hierarchy. Fourth, it would train senior people to notice the gravitational force of their own rank. A high-status person has to understand that their words carry extra weight. If they dismiss too quickly, others may stop speaking. If they approve, the room may follow. If they remain silent, people may read that silence as judgment. Status comes with responsibility because the field organizes around it. The same applies in public discourse. High-status figures should be careful with what they amplify because their attention changes the status of a claim. They can bring visibility to important issues, but they can also inflate weak claims, simplify complex issues, or make their audience treat something as true before it has been examined. The audience also has a responsibility. It should not confuse the high-status source with proof. In families, applied status analysis might look like asking, who has been saying this for years, and why could we not hear them? Was the truth dismissed because it was false, or because it came from the person we had already assigned the role of difficult, emotional, dramatic, young, ungrateful, or unstable? That question can be painful. It may reveal that the family did not lack information. It lacked the humility to receive information from the person with the wrong status. In relationships, applied status analysis asks, whose interpretation automatically becomes the official version? Does the comma partner always define reality? Does the more articulate partner always win the argument? Does the more wounded partner always control the moral frame? Does the more financially secure partner quietly shape decisions? Does one person have to provide evidence for pain while the other is trusted on tone? These questions do not solve everything, but they reveal the ladder. The key insight of this scenario is simple. Status can make weak claims sound strong and strong claims sound invisible. That is why discernment has to slow the room down. It has to ask whether we are responding to the content or the carrier, whether we are hearing the evidence or the rank, whether we are dismissing someone because they are wrong, or because they do not have enough status to be treated as right, whether we are praising insight, or only praising insight once it becomes socially safe to do so. Applied status analysis does not demand that everyone's view be treated as equally accurate. That would be naive. Experience, expertise, responsibility, and earned trust matter. But it does ask that evidence not be dismissed simply because it arrives from a lower rung on the ladder. A healthy field can hear truth from anywhere. It can still test it. It can still ask for evidence. It can still weigh experience. But it does not require truth to wear high-status clothing before it becomes visible. That is the practice. Separate the claim from the speaker. Separate confidence from competence. Separate rank from reality. Ask what the room might finally see if it stopped waiting for status to give truth permission to speak. Part 8. The status discernment practice. Reading rank without becoming ruled by it. If status shapes perception, then discernment has to notice rank without pretending it does not exist. We can call this practice the status check. The first question is, who has status in this field? Who carries weight in the room? Who is listened to quickly? Who changes the atmosphere when they speak? Who receives automatic credibility? The second question is, what gives them status? Is it title, beauty, confidence, wealth, suffering, moral language, calmness, popularity, age, credentials, productivity, rebellion, spiritual authority, or proximity to power? Every field has its own currency. The third question is, who must prove themselves repeatedly? Some people are believed on tone alone. Others need evidence, timing, softness, credentials, emotional control, and repeated validation before the room takes them seriously. The fourth question is, what behavior increases rank here? Certainty, outrage, calmness, productivity, sacrifice, vulnerability, detachment, correct language, success, beauty, busyness. Knowing the currency helps reveal the performance. The fifth question is, what behavior lowers rank here? Admitting ignorance, asking questions, being emotional, setting boundaries, needing help, being poor, being unsure, disagreeing, changing your mind. The sixth question is, what truth becomes costly because of rank? What cannot be said because the person who needs to say it does not have enough status, or because the person who needs to hear it has too much? The seventh question is, am I agreeing with substance or status? Would I judge this differently if the speaker had less power, beauty, wealth, popularity, suffering, credentials, calmness, confidence, or authority? And finally, what would become visible if status were removed? This practice is not about flattening all differences. Some people have earned trust. Some voices carry real wisdom. Some credentials matter. Some experience should be respected. But status should inform discernment, not replace it. A high-status person can be right. A low-status person can be wrong. But the reverse is also true. Discernment notices rank without surrendering truth to it. It honors genuine competence without kneeling before status. It asks the room to slow down long enough for reality to be heard before hierarchy decides what counts as real. Part 9. Final integration. Stepping off the ladder without denying the field. So, as we come towards the close of this episode, we return to the central idea. Status is one of the most powerful hidden forces shaping human behavior. It affects whose voice matters, whose truth is heard, whose mistakes are excused, whose pain is believed, whose confidence becomes authority, whose suffering becomes moral rank, whose beauty becomes credibility, whose popularity becomes proof, and whose disagreement becomes threat. Status decides who gets the benefit of the doubt and who must earn it repeatedly. It decides whose anger is called passion and whose anger is called instability. It decides whose uncertainty is called thoughtfulness and whose uncertainty is called weakness. It decides whose mistakes are contextualized and whose mistakes are treated as evidence of character. It decides who can speak plainly and who must soften every sentence before the room will receive it. Because status often operates invisibly, people mistake its effects for reality. They think they are responding to truth when they are responding to rank. They think they are evaluating evidence when they are responding to confidence, polish, credentials, popularity, beauty, wealth, moral status, calmness, suffering, rebellion, or social proof. They think someone is wise because the field treats them as wise. They think someone is difficult because the field has already placed them in that role. This is why discernment has to ask, what status game is operating here? Not because every room is corrupt, not because every hierarchy is false, not because status is always empty. Some people earn trust, some carry wisdom, some have real competence, some deserve respect because they have demonstrated integrity over time. The task is not to deny status. It is to stop allowing status to decide truth before truth has spoken. So we ask, what currency gives people rank in this field? Is it money, confidence, calmness, suffering, moral language, productivity, busyness, credentials, rebellion, spiritual authority, intellectual complexity, emotional composure? Public visibility, proximity to power. The currency of the room reveals the performance the room is likely to reward. If confidence is the currency, people will perform certainty. If moral purity is the currency, people will perform goodness. If productivity is the currency, people will perform exhaustion. If beauty is the currency, people will perform desirability. If victimhood is the currency, people may perform injury. If detachment is the currency, people may perform not caring. If intelligence is the currency, people may perform complexity. If spiritual maturity is the currency, people may perform calmness. The performance may not be false. That matters. A person may genuinely be confident, moral, productive, attractive, harmed, detached, intelligent, or calm. But once the field rewards that quality with rank, the quality becomes socially charged. It begins doing more than expressing truth. It begins organizing status. Then we ask, who benefits from the hierarchy? Who gains protection? Who is believed quickly? Who is allowed to be wrong? Who is allowed to be angry? Who receives context? Who gets credit? Who avoids accountability? Who becomes untouchable? Who is preserved by the structure? And who pays the cost of it? Because every hierarchy has shadows. If one voice carries too much weight, other voices may shrink. If one person's pain controls the moral field, others may lose the right to speak. If one person's confidence defines the shared reality, other people's uncertainty may be dismissed. If one person's title decides the room, those closest to the truth may remain unheard. Then we ask, what truth is harder to speak because of status? This question is essential. In many rooms, the forbidden truth is not forbidden because it is false. It is forbidden because the wrong person would be exposed by it. The leader would be challenged. The family story would fracture. The popular person would lose moral height. The expert would become accountable. The victim identity would become more complex. The successful image would become less polished. The calm person would be revealed as avoidant. The rebel would be shown to be performing a different kind of conformity. Status often protects the story that gives status its power. That is why stepping off the ladder matters. Stepping off the ladder does not mean pretending hierarchy does not exist. It does not mean treating every voice as equally informed in every situation. It does not mean rejecting expertise, experience, discipline, leadership, or earned respect. It means refusing to let rank hypnotize perception. It means asking, am I performing for rank? Am I saying this because it is true, or because it places me well in the room? Am I staying silent because silence is wise, or because speaking would lower me? Am I performing certainty because I know, or because uncertainty would make me look weak? Am I performing healing because I am grounded, or because pain would damage my image? Am I performing goodness because conscience is alive, or because I need to be seen as clean? Am I performing intelligence because clarity is needed, or because I fear being ordinary? That question can be uncomfortable, but it returns us to the human being beneath the performance. Because status does not only distort how we see others, it distorts how we present ourselves. The ladder becomes internal. We begin managing the self for the imagined gaze. We become polished, defended, curated, morally positioned, intellectually armored, emotionally controlled, visibly wounded, visibly strong, visibly successful, visibly awake, and somewhere underneath all of that, the real self may still be asking to breathe. So the discerning person learns to ask, am I confusing popularity, confidence, beauty, wealth, credentials, suffering, calmness, rebellion, intelligence, or moral purity with truth? Popularity can show what travels. It does not prove what is real. Confidence can show conviction. It does not prove competence. Beauty can attract attention. It does not prove goodness. Wealth can show success in a particular game. It does not prove wisdom. Credentials can show training. They do not prove infallibility. Suffering can reveal harm. It does not prove moral perfection. Calmness can show regulation. It does not prove accuracy. Rebellion can show courage. It does not prove discernment. Intelligence can build arguments. It does not prove honesty. Moral purity can create image. It does not prove goodness. These distinctions protect perception. And finally, we ask, what would I see if I stepped off the ladder? Would I hear the low-status person more clearly? Would I question the high-status voice more honestly? Would I recognize where I have been performing? Would I notice who has been invisible? Would I see that some truths were waiting at the edge because the center was too busy admiring itself? Would I stop confusing being seen with being real? This is not a call to reject society. It is a call to become less ruled by its hidden rankings. Episode 9 has shown that status is not only a social ornament, it is a perceptual force. It shapes attention, belief, credibility, desirability, shame, silence, performance, and obedience. We have explored status as social currency, how rank shapes perception, the difference between dominance and prestige, the fear of falling in the eyes of others, moral status, victim status, and the hidden hierarchies inside relationships, families, and workplaces. Across all of it, the central lesson is clear. Status can inform us, but it must not become our substitute for discernment. A healthy field can honor competence without worshipping rank. It can respect experience without silencing lower status truth. It can recognize harm without turning victimhood into infallibility. It can value confidence without confusing it with truth. It can hear the person at the edge before the person at the center gives permission. Discernment notices rank without surrendering truth to it. In the next episode, we continue Arc 2, The Strategic Human, with Episode 10, The Economics of Attention. If Episode 9 explored status and hierarchy, Episode 10 moves into attention itself. How How attention is captured, monetized, fragmented, traded, exploited, and used as the central currency of modern influence. Because once we understand how rank decides who gets attention, the next question is, what happens when attention itself becomes the marketplace? What happens when human awareness becomes something to harvest? What happens when outrage, fear, beauty, desire, conflict, shame, envy, novelty, and identity become tools for capturing the mind? What happens when the platforms, media systems, advertisers, influencers, political actors, and even ordinary social fields begin competing for the most intimate resource we have, our attention? Episode 10 will ask what we are paying with before money. It will explore attention as time, emotional energy, nervous system activation, memory, identity, and behavioral direction. It will ask how fragmented attention creates fragmented selves, how emotional capture shapes perception, and how reclaiming attention becomes one of the foundations of discernment. So as you leave this episode, consider one question: what ladder are you climbing without admitting it? Perhaps a second: whose truth have you dismissed because the field did not give them enough rank to be heard? Not to shame yourself, not to deny the reality of status, but to become more conscious inside it. May you learn to see the ladders without worshipping them. May you recognize when confidence is being mistaken for truth, when popularity is being mistaken for wisdom, when moral performance is being mistaken for goodness, and when your own self is performing for rank instead of speaking from clarity. May your discernment become strong enough to honor genuine competence without kneeling before status. Until next time, thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to the Discernment Field, Episode 9, Status Games and Social Hierarchies, Rank, Recognition, and the Invisible Ladders Beneath Behavior. I'm James Miller.